This is KTN News.
Welcome back to Inside Politics here on KTN News as we keep an eye on what's happening in the county of Garissa with today's BBI rally. Let's switch gears to something that is of concern to Kenyans that has been happening also. The Kikuyu community remains the most populous in Kenya, followed by the Luhya. The Kalenjin nation takes third position according to the 2019 census report released Friday by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. Now, the report released was volume 2, 3 and 4. The report further detailed the number of unemployed Kenyans as 2.7 million, this being an increase from the 2009 census where 2.1 million Kenyans were seeking work. Grace Kuria has the details.
Months after the release of the 2019 Census Report Volume 1, which showed Kenya has a population of 47.5 million, up from 37.7 million in 2009, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, together with the Treasury officials today, launched Volumes 2, 3 and 4 of the report, which showed that the Kikuyu tribe is the most populous with 8,148,668, followed by the Luhya community with a population of 6,823,842. The Luhyas were closely followed by the Kalenjin with a population of 6,358,113. Then followed the Luo community with a population of 5,066,966. Kamba, Kenyan Somali, Kisii, Mijikenda, Meru, Masai followed in that order.
The least populous tribes were the Halo at 575, the Kenyans, Americans 596, Gusha at 685, El Molo at 1,104, Konso at 1,299.
With the Kenyan youth lamenting over unemployment, the report indicated that the country has an active population of 22.2 million, with those working being 19.5 million and those seeking work being 2.7 million. In education matters, the number of Kenyans enrolled in university more than doubled from 171,855 in 2009 to 470,983 in 2019.
The total urban and rural population was 14,831,700 and 32,732,596 respectively, for urban and rural population respectively.
Now, there is a total of 918,270 persons living with disability, with persons with albinism standing at 9,729. One more census basic report detailing the distribution of population by geopolitical units is set to be released soon. Grace Kuria, KTN News.
Thank you, Grace. So the census report, the data that has been that was released on Friday, has seen political pundits in this country trying to analyze what will be happening in the next couple of years in this country. What impact will this data have on the health of the body politic in this country? The numerical distribution, the numbers. Remember, that is what people or politicians in this country rely on in terms of trying to work their arithmetics and come up with political parties, vehicles, and coalitions. Dismas, from what you've seen in this, how is this likely to help or to affect this country's political permutations going into 2022 as we speak?
You know, when you look at the history of census and the reason why it's done, it's supposed to be for economic and social planning. That we are supposed to be told that, say, in Kisii County, you have X number of people. But unfortunately, in Kenya, the census is about political planning. And even your colleagues in the newsrooms, that's the premium they've given us, that how many cases do you have and how many lawyers?
No, it is not. We've said that 2.7 million Kenyans are not employed. That is an increase from 2.1 in 2009. So we are focusing on all issues.
Yeah, but you see, that was not the intro. The intro is that the Kikuyu remain number one, and then you have the lawyers number two. So what the politicians are going to do is...
it is a political show. Anyway.
Yes, it's a political show, obviously, but anchored in economics. So somebody now will emerge as a Kikuyu kingpin, and when they're having a round table meeting like this, he'll say, I'm coming with 7 million Kikuyus in my hand. And then the Kisii, somebody wants to become Kisii kingpin, will say, I'm coming with 2.7 million. The Somalis, I'm coming with 2.7 million. And in the event, now Mora is going to get lost, because we are supposed to use this information for planning purposes. And in my view, the premium should be that since you have this number of people, how are we going to use it for our boundaries review? How are we going to use it for representation and distributing the national cake? But when you're looking at a pure political space, it means that if you've got 3 tribal leaders, they come in a round table like this, then they'll hold Kenya hostage till the cows come home.
So as for the purposes of this show, I want, we like to help Kenyans build perspectives or make a sense of what's happening in this country. And what we've said, the big 5, the so-called big 5 communities remain the same. Kikuyu, 8.5 million, Luhya, 6.86 million, followed by the Kalenjin and the Luhya and the Kamba. Looking at Kenya's political, in our country's political scene, we have Uhuru Kenyatta, we have Raila Odinga, we have Musalia Mudavadi, we have Kalonzo Musyoka, we have William Ruto. It mirrors the numbers given by Kenya Bureau of Statistics. So what we want to do, and as the Duke of Mosocho, what you need to do for Mora is to help Kenyans analyze why it is like that and why it is likely to be like that in 2022 in terms of using these numbers to play around with Kenyans' minds and what Kenyans can do differently.
Well, if we were to do things differently, in the first case, we wouldn't even release these census, the way they have been said, these are Kisiis or the Luhyas or the Kikuyus.
Okay.
We would just go say that what kind of leadership are we looking at? We say we need this kind of leader, and that's the guy we are going to give office in 2022. But right now, everything we'll be doing is going to be influenced by this tribal arithmetic. And the next question would be, for all these political leaders, is out of these, say, Luhyas, 6 million, thereabouts, how many of them have taken their national IDs? And how many of them are going to be registered voters? Now, for these men, and most of the time there are no females in that conversation, those men now will come to the conversation table and say that since I come from Kisii, I come with 2.7 million. And in my view, the reason why Cherotich needs to be active in the BBI is to ensure that whatever constitution we come up with, we create an opportunity for a man from those in gems that are 200 in Kenya or even 50, that they can have an opportunity into leadership. Like what we have in South Africa. Cyril Ramaphosa does not necessarily come from the biggest community, but because he has leadership skills, is running the nation. Even across the road in Tanzania, Pombe Magufuli does not necessarily come from the biggest community. So I think one of the things we need to do for BBI is to create that infrastructure that we are not going to be held hostage by the big tribes. And also for the big tribes to realize that there can be leadership coming from these other smaller communities.
All right. Ken, what is your take on the census data?
My take on the census results is this, is that population is used for different reasons. In Kenya, unfortunately, population results have always been used for political reasons and to justify economic marginalization. So that when you are distributing resources and people are questioning why you are doing so, you can rely on a document and say, but look, this region or these people, this tribe, when we are saying that, let us go to the OP, I'm not saying this is the state now, but at one time it was, where in government and the security structure, we had members from predominantly one community. You ask, and they say that, you see, they are the largest community. So chances are they're likely to be more in this particular area. And then you ask, are they the only ones who are qualified? Then they tell you, no, we are looking at numbers.
Right.
That is how it has been used. But most importantly, we have seen the big 5. And this big 5 should be a lesson to the ongoing legal reform, constitutional reform initiatives, whereby we should never allow 2 or 3 communities to come together and frustrate the rest of the population. This is the time to raise the threshold in the Constitution. Move from 50% plus 1 vote and go to a threshold that will require to bring more players on the table. If you look at the Kikuyus and Kalenjins, 8.6 and 6 point something, that is 14. To counter that, you need the other 3 to come together. It's like the UN Security Council, that if Kikuyus and Kalenjins have the veto powers on the Kenyan political scene, if the 2 come together, they can, with ease, take the leadership for the next 100 years. That calls to question the idea of 50% plus 1 vote. Is it time to go to 60% plus 1 vote, or to have a percentage that will not allow the big 5 to politically marginalize the rest of Kenya?
Good question. Chero?
When I was counted along with my household last year, I don't remember at any point saying that I was Kalenjin, and which was nomenclature from 1946, when the Nandi, Tugen, Kipsigis, Marakwet, Keyo were all put together and told they were Kalenjins. But I was not asked, and I did not say. And so when I also look at the census results, and I hear there are X number of Kalenjins, just know it was -1, because me, I did not declare myself as a Kalenjin or a Kikuyu or as a Luo or as a Luhya. So I always find it questionable. And if we became a little bit historical and went back to the original census during colonial times, why were the numbers presented as they were presented? Why were the Kikuyus, the Kalenjins, the Luos, the Luhyas, the big 5 as you, already presented as a numerically a strong group, numerically strong group? And why has it been ever since politicized, even when you don't declare your specific ethnicity? That's number 1. For me, when I see those results, I say this is for purposes of gerrymandering. This is for purposes of realigning resources, politicized realigning of resources, when in actual fact, for planning purposes, we should be looking at development. We should be looking at affirmative focus for development. Look at Marsabit, the biggest county in Kenya. But there will be arguments that because there's only a handful of people in Marsabit who obviously don't count. Well, the northern frontier lands never really counted for much, and you will argue that those guys need to get a smaller piece of the pie. You remember the whole ASAL situation where there was affirmative focus on the ASAL regions, and then suddenly the whole of Kenya became ASAL. And once the whole of Kenya became ASAL, then there's no affirmative focus anymore. So for me, if the census was used for planning, for affirmative development focus in areas that have been underserved and marginalized for so long, it's exactly like the 2/3 gender rule. The 2/3 gender rule is not about men and women. It is about the tyranny of one group that has advantages, be it rich people, so it could be rich men and rich women, versus other people who are not rich, whether it's men or women. The 2/3 gender rule should also have addressed issues, or addresses issues also of disability, of minority. So the Njems, the Elmolos that you're talking about would have had an opportunity through this. But we are not able to implement it because we simplify things. We're simplistic and we say this is about men and women trying to be in power together and competing. So when I look at the census results, when I look at things that we have failed to implement from a development perspective, and everything degenerates into the space, I know this is a political show of politics, I say then I can also safely assume that the results coming out will always ultimately have a political end game, even though the real purpose of census and knowing who we are and where we sit should be for planning.
Okay.
It doesn't end up that way, because do the resources really end up where they are supposed to end up?
Okay.
And I do not believe, and then there was a 1 shilling, 1 kilometer argument. So we'll end up politicizing everything around the census. But this tyranny that Kenya must be led by Mount Kenya or Bonde la Ufa, or now recently Lake, and so on and so forth, or the ocean, because we see that there's also discussions on that end. I mean, when will we stop being so ethnically balkanized and decide that we are Kenyans, no matter that this is an Echesa or a Cherotich or a Mokua? You know, so for me...
We'll stop doing that.
Yeah.
When you review our census, when they're giving out numbers, they're not telling us how many Kisses there are in.
Correct.
They're not how many
We shouldn't be,
Kikuyus.
we
I want to
shouldn't have
challenge
do
that.
We should start
I want to
focusing
challenge.
we should
Challenge.
start focusing on
challenge
issues.
Challenge.
what Dismas and Chero are saying by asking a question. Is this all gloom in terms of, is it all gloom to gerrymander, to plan politically, to, because it has happened in other mature democracies where we, you know, people plan, they know this X number of African American voters, of Latino voters, and this has this impact on whether Barack Obama will be elected for a second term as president. Is it all wrong? And I'll come back to both of you.
I would say that it's not all wrong, and I think studies have demonstrated that, that even in mature democracies, issues and resources are channeled based on the numbers of different segments of the population, especially the marginalized. So it's not all wrong. But why is it not happening right in certain democracies and fledgling democracies like the Kenyan democracy? It's because we end up looking at politicization against the backdrop of election, and that becomes everything. Now, if you look at the rate of representation in Kenya, we have an MCA, we have a member of parliament, we have a senator, and of course we have a president. And all these guys have people beneath them. Even MCAs have ward reps and all that. And you want to ask yourself, if the census report is telling us how many Kisis are there, how many Luos are there, and which tribal groupings are big, to what extent our politicians now engaging with these numbers to extrapolate it and say these are the number of Kisis, this is where they live, because ultimately, if we end the conversations with numbers of tribal groupings, then we're not solving anything. We have to situate it within a location and look at these numbers against the resources, and then start development conversations that will be looking at how do we meet the resource demands for these people given the resources that we have in terms of land and the health facilities and all that. So if there is a propagation of marginalization based on numbers, it is a failure on our political leaders. Because I would expect, especially leaders from the ASAL regions, leaders from regions that are arable and agriculturally productive, to now sit down and say these are the numbers. If these numbers are supposed to be used to allocate resources, how do we use these numbers and the resources to address the plight of our people? Okay. That is where we are failing. But I think the other critical thing is when Kenyans lose focus and start looking at these numbers as a sense in which the next election is going to pan out, again, it is terribly wrong, because the assumption Kenyans are making is that all Kenyans vote along tribal lines, and then it pushes them to that tribal grouping, which is wrong. And I can tell you that it's not like Kenyans vote along tribal lines. And even if Kenyans were voting along tribal lines, Kenyans from all the tribes in this country are sharp. If Luos vote for a sharp Luo who understands the issues of the Luos, I won't have a problem. Okay. So if we cascade these numbers down and just focused on, then what are the issues? These are the numbers that we have. All right. What are the issues that our political leaders need to attend to? And in an election, to what extent do we forget about the numbers and just focus on the issues?
Chero, when does the ethnicization of our politics become wrong as compared again to what's happening in mature democracies where we have pure, blatant ethnicization of these things, the numbers, plus the problems that they have. The African Americans are facing these challenges in this and this state, so they need A, B, C, D. When does ours become so wrong, and what can we do to remedy that?
To answer your question, it becomes wrong when, and I witnessed this personally at the end of 2007, 2008, it becomes wrong when you hear war cries in the dead of the night, where people, young men, young Kalenjin men are being rallied to kill, to chase away, to destroy people's property, kill people because they are not from that area and because they voted in a particular way. That is when it goes wrong. I have not seen a direct street-based clash between Latinos and African Americans because they have been pitted against each other. No, it is for the campaign teams to understand how to appeal to that particular group. So for me, at the end of the day, the ethnicization of politics is used to whip up negative sentiment. It's used to find foot soldiers, innocent, impoverished foot soldiers. Those young men who are crying in the dead of the night and going to fight, to steal, to kill, to destroy, to loot, to plunder. That led us to a watershed moment in Kenya's history. Who are they and where are they today? And how did they benefit from that? So for me, the ethnicization is negative when it is used by political kingpins to mobilize and create aggression against other people so that they can get their few kuras here and there or intimidate people into voting the right way. For me, if the census was geographic in nature, to say, where do these people live? Not where do the Kisis live, but we are talking about this particular part of Kenya or that particular part of Kenya. How expensive is it to get services there? Therefore, do I need to allocate more resources in order for schools, for hospitals, for things to reach there? Not, is it the Borana who live there? How many are they? And how can I make sure that they access these services or not? So it should not be about my ethnicity, insofar as my ethnicity has nothing to do with my development needs.
Right.
We all need health. We all need education. We all need basic infrastructure. We all need electricity. We all need land as a factor of production. And that has nothing to do with the tribe that I come from. That is my ethnic identity, but it is not. So this same national ethos that BBI is busy gaslighting us over is not addressing this issue,
and
where we should rise above and beyond who we are ethnically to a people called Wakenya. But we are not doing that. That's why the Ma community is being whipped. That's why in Kikuyu, that's why in Mombasa, that's why in Buhungu, that's why in Kisii, and on and on and on, dividing us instead of uniting
And what
us.
you're saying is just sums up what we've had terms in this country like Jamii Ndogo and all those things, and what and the affirmative action needed. Ken, where did the rain start beating us, in your opinion?
The rain started beating us when we took the ethnic agenda as the overriding objective in the discharge of public service, retention in public service, and policy implementation. And I failed to mention something, that among the big five, even the Luhya nation is not seriously considered on the political plate, because it is thought that that number two is not helping them. They are not using it to advance a political agenda. And they'll tell you that go to Mlembe, everyone will pick. That tells you one thing, that in this country, voting, political decisions, public service retention is along ethnic lines. But we have communities that do vote objectively and they get victimized for that.
Like the Luhya nation.
It's not for nothing that Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto's party have more members of parliament within Kakamega County compared to Musalia Mudavadi's and Moses Wetangula's party. Yet those are thought about political kingpins. And unfortunately, Ben, this one is also sneaking into even our professional life. People should think beyond their tribes. Go to the management of public universities, for example. Previously, it was if you have to be a VC at KU, then KU is within Kikuyu, you must be a Kikuyu. If you go to Nyanza Maseno, you must be a Luo. If you go to Moi University, you must be a Kalenjin.
You've seen a VC at Moi being ejected, basically.
Being ejected, and he is a very competent person. Even LSK elections, which is the body that I'm associated with, during voting, we have some of us lawyers who vote tribally, while others vote objectively. So ethnicity is eating us up. It is, ethnicity per se is not bad. It is how ethnicity is used and abused by powers that be that becomes bad. How will policy be overtaken by ethnicity? We are seated here as policy implementers. We want to set up universities, and because Chero is a Kalenjin, we are now saying, no, if we have 5 universities, take one to Kericho. Because we have no Luhya here, we say we have 30 acres in Kakamega. Why can't we put up a prison in that particular area? So that one area, we have 5 acres on university, another area we are putting up a prison for chicken thieves, and so on, and so on. And that is how ethnicity has affected us. We should reach a place in this country where it matters not who is at the top. It matters not who is going to lead an interview, but what matters is the content that you are having. Otherwise, in this country, you can go for an interview and you know that if you are within Kisii and you are called a Mukua, you have an upper hand compared to a Cherotich. Cherotich will have a chance in Eldoret. A Chesa will have a chance in Kakamega. Even within Eldoret, they know their own names. So they push you to another area.
What's your take on this? And we can have a whole day discussing this and where the rain started beating us. Kipchumba Karori says it started in Lancaster in 1960. I don't know if that's true, but it's a story for another day. What have the final say on this?
You know, when we got into trouble with these tribal numbers, And these tribal numbers are the ones which promote impunity, mediocrity, and corruption. If you know you come from a particular block and somebody from your village is the president, you will be very happy because you know there's going to be abundance of resources. Like, for instance, look at Nairobi. We are now told that 10% of the Kenyan population stay in Nairobi. We are supposed to be using those statistics to ask ourselves how many more Kenyans are likely to come to Nairobi. Maybe in the next 10 years, 20% of the population will be staying in Nairobi. How do we plan for roads, for facilities, for water? But instead, what do we do? Instead of looking at the 10% in Nairobi, we want to break it down and find out how many Kisis are here and how many Luhyas are here, so that we know which political parties to join and how to vote people. So people end up going for, or rather winning political office, not because of what Martin Luther King had said about the content of their character or their intellectual infrastructure or leadership, simply because they've got these numbers. And you see these politicians, most of them, a good number of them are clowns and queens. When they go to the podium, wanasema sisi tuko na number, we are the tyranny of numbers. So the only thing they bring to the table is numbers. Not appreciation of policies or developing policies or anything. They just come with numbers and numbers and numbers. And because we are representative democracy, the numbers tend to win. So maybe in future, when a number of these panelists go to the National Assembly, we need to review our laws that when we are doing our census, you are not going to ask people whether you are Kisii or Kalenjin. Go to Kisii and count how many people stay in Kisii. You give the example of America. It's well known that maybe the Latinos or the blacks have been marginalized. So they need that information to give them resources. But it's not for pure voting. Because if it was for pure voting, then Barack Obama would have never become president. I mean, he was voted in by whites. Even Trump, right now we are told that the blacks are aligning towards him. So we should be very careful and do away with these things. Like, for instance,
became president because of the black and Latino vote.
But you see where Willa comes from, they voted in somebody, a Somali. It's not because there were so many Somalis, but it's because Junet convinced them, or maybe convinced the Baba, that I can offer
So we need to see more examples of such.
Yes.
We need to see more examples of Suna East.
Yeah, and that's the reason why we must condemn Olekina, because he says that if I'm a Kisii man, I go buy a land in Nakuru and I settle, that I'm not supposed to participate in local politics. What kind of voodoo logic is that?
By the way, when the declaration, the Ma declaration came out and saying Ma land is for Ma people, but in that same declaration they say, and in areas all over the country where Ma people live, we demand a level of representation in those spaces. So there was a lot of contradiction. If you read that declaration, we want to be represented in those places, but our land is ours and we want it all back. This is the kind of populist, emotive politics that does not take Kenya anywhere. No matter the fact that land is crucial, land is a factor of production, I will never downplay it. I will never downplay the land grabbing, the absentee landlords, and so on and so forth. But it was wrong what he did yesterday.